Hello and welcome to Dinks with Debt. My name is Andrea, my husband's name is Anthony, and we're a double income, no kids family on a journey to get our finances under control and tackle our consumer debt. All right, so today I'm going to be going over our week 3 budget recap, and that is going to take us from January 16th through January 22nd. Many of you know that my husband and I are just trying to get our bearings with this month being our first time budgeting in, I would say, nearly 10 years, if not just a little over 10 years. And we are just trying to get the hang of things, keeping our spending within our limits and even being aware of things in our budget that just pop up that we, lost track of or didn't think of. And this week was no exception. We actually received a phone call early in the week. I would say I think it was around Tuesday, that we had some friends that were going to be, coming through our area and that we haven't seen in several years. And folks don't usually come out this way. We agreed that we would spend our dining out money to visit with our friends, and if possible we wanted to try and treat them to dinner. So that was something that we knew we were going to have in the latter part of the week. If you have been following the news in the United States, at least, we've had several weather events. In California, there were a number of wildfires that impacted the Los Angeles area and those surrounding communities. And it has truly been heartbreaking and devastating to watch. So we've been, definitely thinking about all those people that have been impacted. And it's just been a rough time, I think, for a lot of folks in the country. In my part of the country, on the Gulf states, we had some frigid weather come through. So we had what they call an Arctic blast. Where we live, we typically don't see cold weather beyond the low 50s. I would say upper 40s is really as cold as it usually gets. Forecasts were calling for temperatures in the teens and snow, which is very uncharacteristic of our part of the country. So Anthony and I had to make some decisions based on what we felt was right for our family and our home and all that kind of stuff. So I'll kind of talk you through our decisions. Okay, so around Saturday to Sunday, the weather reports, and forecasts became more confident that we were going to receive a big, weather event. Going to bring freezing rain and dump large amounts of snow in our area. And, those are not weather conditions that our housing are built to withstand. We don't have fireplaces. It's not very common at all to have fireplaces in homes down here where we live. So, firing up the fireplace isn't an alternate means to heating your home. In 2021, actually in February, around the same time, we experienced another winter storm that shut down the entire power grid in our state of Texas. And many people were left without power, without a way to heat their homes. You saw a lot of, really tragic things with people that had gas stoves that were trying to keep themselves warm, and unfortunately created dangerous conditions with carbon monoxide. And, so our region was hit, pretty hard the last time that storm came through in 2021. Now, in addition to, homes not being built to those standards of, winter weather and the power grid failing, we also had issues with having drinking water. The water supply from the public works, pipes and things froze or burst, and it was, days and weeks for a lot of that stuff to get repaired and water supplies to be restored. Many people experienced frozen pipes in their homes and burst pipes in their homes, water mains in their neighborhoods that broke. So it was really a traumatic experience for a lot of people in our region. Anthony and I had to have some tough conversations about how we were going to prepare for ourselves, but, you know, also to prepare our home to, you know, weather the storm. Now, because we live in, you know, the coastal region of Texas, we already had a generator to, you know, to get us through hurricane season, which lasts from June to November. And at the literally the very end of last hurricane season, the last storm that came through that knocked our power out, on the 5th, I think it was the 5th or 6th day that we didn't have power, our generator died. It coincidentally was the same day that our power was restored. So thankfully we weren't, you know, left in the dark or without electricity. It served its purpose for several hurricane seasons. But at that time we tried to find a technician that could, you know, figure out what was wrong with it and try to repair it. That repair estimates unfortunately came back, quite high and basically the same price as purchasing a new one. So at that time we decided, you know, not to repurchase, and we would wait for the, you know, hurricane season sales and things like that in the coming year. Well, fast forward to January 2025, and we, you know, all of a sudden found a need for that generator that we hadn't repurchased. So with, you know, the forecasts being what they were and general panic and anxiety that was reawoken in pretty much everybody in our region, you know, we decided that it was a purchase that we should make at that time to get a generator to be able to, you know, have reliable power and a heat source if the power grid failed again. We also made preparations to have, you know, 5-gallon drums of water for Anthony and myself, and you know, that would take care of, you know, keeping our home sanitary, being able to flush toilets and wash hands and bathe and cook. So we looked at our savings and decided to shuffle some things around and make those purchases. So you won't see those in the upcoming budget recap, but I just wanted you to know the background of what transpired over week 3. And that'll give you a little bit of insight as you see some of the purchases that we made for emergency groceries, and the extra tanks of gas and supplies to run the generator. All right, so now comes the account tracker. Now, you all saw me last week get these highlighters labeled for the different categories that we have in our budget, and I'm doing what the budget mom calls her highlighter method. So essentially she kind of writes out the expenses that that she's made out of her account over the week, and then at the end of the day or the end of the week she'll go through and highlight what that category, the color for that category. So I don't have enough markers. I haven't dug them out of my desk just yet, but we currently have a highlighter for dining out, unplanned, my spending money, Anthony's spending money, household expenses, groceries, debt payments, and prescriptions and copays, which I think is going to be relabeled as medical. But I'm just going to take you through our expenses so you can kind of see what all happened. So we started at the end of week 2, we had a $1,500 rollover, so $1,500.12. And then Anthony's paycheck for week 3 came in at $925.17. You can see here I had our regular, fridge restock, so our weekly grocery trip. We sent money to our savings account for our lunches. We had life insurance, that was a life insurance policy that was paid for a family member. I call that a subscription, but it came out for $16.92. We had some debt payments for our Chase account at $83 and our First Wells Fargo card at $688. We were at that point trying to get our Christmas savings taken care of for the week at $35. And then Anthony accidentally used his, our main checking account for his lunch purchase of pizza. And so you'll see an adjustment on the next page for that. Anthony did his gas, refilling the tank on his truck at $75.93. And then you'll see the friends that I mentioned, we ended up, taking care of dinner the entire amount. Now you'll remember, I said that our budget was going to be $75 every other week, and this week was one of our weeks that we had money to eat out. Before we got to this restaurant, Anthony and I had a conversation that, we would like to pick up the bill. So if, the restaurant that we picked was, a little bit more affordable, and maybe, we could try to get water for drinks and that kind of thing. But we decided beforehand, if we do go over, then we will make the adjustments out of our lunch accounts, our lunch money. So we ended up spending more than the $75. You'll see $107.53. And we made the adjustment from my lunch account. You'll see that on the next page. So we did actually end up spending only $75 for that dinner out. So I'm going to scoot us up just a little bit more. Our Netflix subscription came out at $24.66. And then I ended up visiting a friend and going to watch her kids' basketball game. We don't have children. That's why we're the Dinks with Debt, the double income, no kids. And so I didn't know that schools charge you to go watch your own kids play a sport. So, I was happy to pay the $6.49 to get into the, to the gym to go see her kid. But geez, it costs a lot of money to be a parent. So that was just something that was new to me. Since I'm not a parent, I don't usually face those kind of little expenses here and there. But you'll see here the next green highlighted expense is for the emergency groceries. And I went ahead and stockpiled some shelf-stable foods, some canned goods, things like that, so that if we use them during, this winter freeze, great. If not, I've already got a jump start to our hurricane preparation. And so that was an additional expense. I'm not entirely sure if I should have categorized this as unplanned, but I put it in groceries. So that's the color that I used for the highlighter. I did top off my gas tank. If you've never been through one of these type of events, or even, hurricane preparation, gas can also be a limited resource, after the storm hits. And so it's always wise to top off your gas tank before the weather event occurs. So I didn't really travel a whole lot the week prior in week 2. So I only needed $15.55 to top off my gas tank. While I was out, I was running an errand and returned some merchandise, a Christmas gift that I purchased in December, and changed my mind on, and so I didn't end up giving that to the person that I intended to give it to. So $24.88 came back into our checking account. Now you'll see here, let me scoot us up just a bit. You'll see here the next yellow highlighted expense is another dinner takeout. We had Chinese takeout on this day, and that was, honestly, we were exhausted. So Anthony worked a full day, and for him, that's typically about 12 hours, 12 hours for his responsibilities at work. And I had taken, my day to secure things around the house, so making sure that pipes were covered and plants were brought in, and landscaping had been draped with cloths, or I guess like covers and things like that. So it was a lot of work, and at the end of the night we were just too tired to do anything, so we opted to get dinner takeout, and Anthony volunteered his lunch funds to to pay for that. So you'll see an adjustment on the next page as well. So this next one, Anthony had to refill his truck. So he had been doing a lot of errands and things for the generator to get the generator up and running and make sure that all the connections were correct and all the things. But he filled up his gas tank one more time before the weather event, and it was $55.09. We did purchase the generator out of our savings, so you don't see that purchase on this account. But the generator needed gas and the generator needed oil, so those were two additional expenses that we had to allocate from our household expenses. Now the last couple are debt payments, so you'll see that our Barclays 2 card came out at $189, MasterCard came out at $53, and then our cell phones came out at $241.54, and that was just, one of our regular bills. Our second huge debt payment, the second Wells Fargo card, came out at $643, and then we had one medical copay, so that was $15. Now on page 2, you'll see this is where, there we go. This is where we had sent money back from our lunch accounts into our checking account to make sure that, I guess, the amounts were squared up. So Anthony, like I said, volunteered his lunch money to pay for that extra dinner out that we had at $44. So that was a credit to our checking account. I paid for the overage when we treated our friends to dinner, and that was $32.53. And then Anthony transferred money back for the pizza that he purchased on the wrong card. So he transferred the $11.60 back. Okay, so one question I would love to get, I guess, your opinion or your thoughts on is my numbers don't match up with what, was expected or I guess projected at the end of week 2. So according to the, ledger sheet and the expenses and everything that came out, we should have started with $1,500 and 12 cents. So when you add the 925, that would be a starting balance for week 3 of $2,425.29. When you add all of our expenses for week 3, that totaled to $2,635.06. Adding in the credits we did for, the adjustments for the lunches, and then also the merchandise return that I made, that totaled to $113.01 that was added back into our account, so a deposit. Which meant that our ending balance should have been negative by $96.76. Now, the problem I'm having is that when I checked our account statement, our, let's see, hope you can see that. Our account statement showed that our ending balance as of January 15th actually was $1,779.11. And so when you add in Anthony's paycheck, his third paycheck of the month, we started with $2,704.28, and then subtracting the expenses of $2635.06 and adding in the deposits for those, lunch adjustments and the merchandise return, we should have ended up with $182.23 in the black. So we should have been positive and not negative like the math shows. Now, okay, so this is my spending by category sheet. And so this is why I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to keep up with the highlighter method, because I feel like this may be a little bit better, like for my brain, to keep our expenses organized. It is nice to see on that ledger sheet all the different colors, and you can kind of see the prevalence of one color over another, and that indicates what areas that you're spending most in. I already know that our debts are, usually the most numerous week by week. Aside from that, it's our food budget. So those two areas are, where we spend the most, where we're hemorrhaging the most money. But this spending by category sheet I feel like is helpful because at the end of these 5 weeks of January, all I have to do is add the different categories week by week. So I should have 5 totals for gas for the truck, and I just need to add those, not necessarily the individual times that he filled up the truck. So likewise, the personal spending, groceries, that kind of thing. So I feel like this may make a little bit more sense for the way my brain thinks, but we'll see. I'm gonna give it another couple of weeks, maybe through the end of January, maybe February, just to see if that's something that sticks. But overall, we did bust the budget on the gas for the truck because we planned for $80 and we ended up spending $131.02 for those 2 times Anthony filled up. I came in under budget in personal spending for both of us. The household expenses was over budget. We planned only for $20 a week. And again, the groceries, because of the emergency supplies, that was over budget as well. The lunches came out to a net 0. We did spend money there, but he adjusted from his lunch account, so there was no actual impact on our budget. The dining out, same thing. We were over budget, but then we adjusted with the credits from our lunch accounts, so we actually ended up spending only $75 for that category. The prescriptions and copays, I mentioned that, I don't know if you can see that. I mentioned that those 2 may be combined into one category, and we may call it medical. As we set up our February budget, that may be the route that I go. But we only spent $15 in those 2 categories, and we had planned for more than that. And then our unplanned expenses, again, I kind of mentioned the generator, supplies that probably should have gone in unplanned maybe, or the groceries for the emergency supplies should have gone into unplanned, but I left them where they are at this time. All right, so I mentioned that we were expecting a rollover of $1,500.12. The ending daily balance in our statement actually said that we had $1,700.79. I'm sorry, $1,779.11. So right there, we already have a $200 difference. The check was, pretty much spot on. And the credits and deposits in this column here, the total doesn't include the 113. So what I did was I added that to the ending total, for the week, so we can figure out the rollover. But just the rollover from week 2 and Anthony's check totaled $2,704.28. So when we go down into our expenses, we were expecting tolls to come out, and they didn't. So we weren't, using the toll roads as much. The life insurance came out as normal. The lawn service, obviously with the weather event being what it was, we asked them to come back in 2 weeks. And I promise in 2 weeks, our grass is going to be, green and grown and need tending to. So kicking this can down the road a little bit, was fine. The Netflix came out as normal, and our cell phones came out as normal as well. So we ended up with expenses being $283.17, leaving us with $2,421.11 to roll over into our debt category. Now our debts, we did end up, sorry about that. Our debts, we did end up getting, all of those debts taken out as expected, with the exception of the Barclay 2 card. That one came in $1 over for some reason, but it didn't change the expected amount too much. We were planning on $1,655, and what ended up coming out was $1,656. So $24.21 and 11 cents minus $16.56 leaves us with $756.11, and that rolls over into our variable spending. Now, this is where you can kind of see that we run into trouble. We had expected about, little less than $400. We actually ended up with more than that, but we overspent in several categories. So gas for the truck was over budget. Gas for my car was under budget. Personal spending was under budget, except for the household, that was over budget. Groceries came in at $209.28. We planned for $75. Our lunches came out as planned. Dining out came out as planned. Prescription was under budget. Co-pays were under budget, and unplanned, was under budget since I allocated all those other supplies to household and groceries. But our expenses ended up totaling, our variable expenses came out to $589.73. And so our leftover of $756.11 minus $589.73 left us with $175.38. And then we were, planning for that Christmas savings, as we do every week, of $35. And so that left us with an expected balance of $140.38. And so that is a positive number, which keeps us in the black, which is great. But, you can see we were actually expecting a negative number. So that's kind of the first thing that I want to ask you all. I'm not really sure, what happened, except that, we started out with a higher balance than we expected. So obviously when we get down to the end of our expenses, we will have, more money than we expected, if that makes sense. Now, if you'll recall, I didn't add in the adjustments that we made to our account, transferring the money from our lunch account back into our checking account for those food purchases. And so when you add those back in, we actually ended up with $288.39. Again, where we were expecting negative $125.88. Now, here's the second thing, I guess the, thing that I wanted to ask you all. I checked our bank statement, and at the end of the day on January 22nd, our balance actually was $211.91. So this math also isn't adding up, if that makes sense. So that was, with expenses and things like that being already cleared, there was nothing pending and all that kind of stuff on the end of the day, January 22nd. So I'm not entirely sure why my numbers are so off. I know that when we come in, under budget in certain categories and that money just kind of rolls over, I know that that would account for some of that overage, but it just feels like there must be a step or something that I'm not catching or not documenting correctly. And I'm not a CPA by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm gonna check out some tutorials online and see if there's, something I'm missing or I'm indicating incorrectly or something, but the math is not mathing. The expectation was that we were gonna end up with a positive number once we added in our true balance and the exact numbers for what came out and what didn't and all that kind of stuff, which kind of mimics the positive balance that we had in reality. So I'm glad that those things are kind of at least on the right side of zero, you know what I mean? But I'm frustrated, I guess, as the person that does all the numbers. I don't understand where my math error is. So it's hard, I think, when you're trying to track and get your bearings and all this kind of stuff, for the things not to add up the way that they are. I would appreciate any comments or insight that you guys may have. When I start our week 4 recap, we are going to start with the ending daily balance that was reflected in our bank account. So we'll start with $211.91, not what I have on paper of $288. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. Now, the reason this is our overall January monthly budget And so the reason that I'm at least like kind of happy that we're not negative, we're actually on the positive side, is because for January, we were expecting a positive, surplus, money left over at the end of the month. And so that's important because in January, my husband has 5 paychecks, but in February, there's only 4 paychecks in February. So we are going to need, I'm just, kind of reading the writing on the wall. We're going to need some rollover from week 5, to go into week 1 of February. And so that money can roll over week to week and pay for this really expensive week 3 that happens. And so now this part actually is becoming a little bit more clear. I mentioned in several previous videos that I always felt like, I guess, unsettled because I was having to shift money back from our savings to our checking account. And we weren't going negative and, we weren't bouncing checks and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't understand why I was having to send money back and forth so much. And it was because, I can see it clearly now, we had very lofty savings goals, so sending $500, $600, $700 to savings every month just for emergency savings. And then we had our Christmas savings and our HOA savings and, those other little smaller sinking funds. But week 3 is super expensive just out of our debt payments. So it's no wonder that around week 3, we get into trouble. That's where the account, runs to zero and there's not enough to take out, the bills that were being drafted. So, like I said, we were very fortunate to have had the money in savings. So we've never been late on payments or never, missed anything or had overdrafts and stuff like that. But it makes more sense seeing it, on a calendar and then going through and tracking these expenses from week to week. It makes so much sense now. So, that's kind of where we are right now. So from here, I guess I'm going to kind of close out the video just by saying, I appreciate all of you that are watching and, kind of cheering us on. This has been such a learning experience. I know, not just for myself, but for Anthony, because we are resolved not to use our credit cards again. And I, it's unfortunate that we had to dip back into our remaining savings, and I'll do a savings account update, I think, just to kind of show like, where we started from and, how we move things around. But, we looked at, the probability or the likelihood of the grid failing and not having, potable water and all that kind of stuff. And we just felt like it was the right thing for our family to do. Thankfully, I can say that, the power grid did not fail this time. So that was great. It meant that a lot of people, weren't placed in dangerous situations because of the winter storm. And, for that, I'm thankful for my community members and people in our state. It was a very devastating storm the last time that came through. And, that kind of triggered that trauma response. But we're slowly learning that we can't just continue to add to our debt, to solve these crises that keep popping up. And it, really underscores the importance of having emergency savings, and not just emergency savings, but a long-term savings and a car repair fund and, all the other things. And we can't do those things unless we get our debt, under control and out of our lives. So, I'm going to go ahead and close the video. I feel like, we had some wins, we had some setbacks in week 3, but we are pressing on. So thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with another update soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.